My friends, it was almost exactly a year ago when I tackled a 3-tone German camouflage on a Jagdpanther. It was my first serious experience with a paint job like that, and despite some complications, I was very pleased with the result. Now, pretty much exactly a year later, I'm here again with another German kitty. This time it's a Jagdpanther which I've built in the previous video, and because I've become more confident in airbrushing, I'll try some post-shading over its 3-tone paint job. So, let's see how it went. But before we get to the fun stuff, every painting session, at least in my case, starts with destruction. But keeping some parts removable makes the painting a lot easier. I just feel bad for the model when I'm taking it all apart. Another very important step is washing the model with soapy water. There's always a lot of dust and grease from our fingers all over the surface, which is obviously no good. Now I can attach the model to the Octopus M2M painting stand and we're ready to go. The first coat is primer. I like them dark, be it black or dark brown, because they make post-shading much easier. There was a discussion on the Sprue Cutters Union podcast about using colored primers, and one of their points was how cold tones, such as black or gray, make warm colors rather dull. Considering dark yellow is very warm, I opted for a dark brown undercoat which won't desaturate the color, yet provide a nice foundation for shading. At this point, I had a major disaster moment when the securing nut broke off. Don't ask how, but I somehow managed to fix it back into place with superglue, thank goodness, because without it, the painting wouldn't be so pleasant. So, with a nice uniform coat of primer, we can proceed to the actual painting. Okay, paints. I'm gonna try the AK Real Color range, and for the base coat, I'm gonna use these 3. They have multiple dark yellows in their range, and I chose the darkest and most vivid looking as an initial shadow coat of sorts. I applied it in recessed areas where sunlight wouldn't reach, and on the inner sides of hatches which wouldn't get faded so much either. This is nothing spectacular and not entirely necessary either, but at least those hatches will give us a nice color variation. The main body color is the standard dark yellow. It's a very nice shade straight from the bottle. Actually very similar to the Tamiya equivalent, but this one is a little bit warmer. Tamiya dark yellow has a slight green tint, and in both cases they're very thick, so they need to be diluted before you start airbrushing them, and Mr. Leveling Thinner is the best choice if you're looking for a nice, smooth finish. I diluted them in about 50-50 ratio for this coat. Also, it might not seem like it, but the dark primer is already doing its job. It's gonna be especially noticeable in the Zimmerit pattern. The next step, or rather the first step in my post-shading approach, is to spray a round of airbrushed pin wash, so to say. It's a made-up name, of course, and a more accurate term would be grime pass or shadow outline, and it's a 50-50 mixture of Tamiya flat brown and black. Of course, extremely diluted with leveling thinner in about 90% ratio. This technique is like magic. Not only it outlines surface details just like a regular pin wash would do, but it's also a good practice round before we start adding highlights. For example, I wasn't entirely sure how I wanted to approach this model, but as I was outlining everything, the picture slowly became clearer. The model started speaking, so to say, and the surface was suddenly telling me what needs to be done and where. But hey, considering it's just one part of the entire process, it doesn't look so bad, right? The upcoming steps will be all about adding sand beige into the dark yellow. We'll do it in 2 steps, and both layers will be diluted with Tamiya Orange Cap lacquer thinner. Just like the previous step was about spraying a dark color over details, these steps are about lighter colors applied around them. It's a rather slow process and you need some precision, so a 0.2mm nozzle in the airbrush is more than preferable. Same with the lacquer thinner. The Orange Cap Tamiya has paint drying retarder added, which helps with tip drying on your airbrush. You know, that moment when dry paint starts building up at the end of the needle and instead of a smooth paint flow, the airbrush will start sputtering. The first layer covers pretty much the entire surface, but it's applied in an uneven cloud pattern. The second one is even lighter, again more sand beige and more lacquer thinner. The consistency should be roughly 80-20, and the lighter the paint, the smaller surface it should cover. That's how we can achieve nice color gradients and also that subtle, smooth variation and texture in the paint job. Sometimes I go with 3 to 5 layers of highlights depending on the subject, but on this one I was satisfied with 2. Mostly because I didn't want to spend too much time on it, as pretty much 2/3 of the model are gonna be covered with green and brown. But we can clearly see here why post-shaded dark yellow can be so pleasant to look at. Note how the dark primer helped to shade the Zimmerit. It's pretty much gonna be nicely visible without any pin washes. And I really want to make a plain dark yellow tank now. Moving on, the camouflage will be painted using AK real colors as well. But this time they'll be diluted only with the orange cap Tamiya thinner. Starting with the green, which is usually easier to spray than brown, I applied the colors without any highlighting. They're not overly dark in the first place, but if you're going with the post-shading method, the final result is always going to be lighter. I'm using a color profile as a reference, the one which is supplied with the kit instructions, and there's a very simple reason behind it. First off, I like the pattern, and second, the historical photos of the Jagdpanther 314, at least those that I know of, make it impossible to see the camouflage. I think the tank was just very dusty, so everything is guesswork. And when that's the case, everything is fine. I also need to mention John Bonani, who's a camouflage airbrushing guru for me, and his experiences with AK real colors and some of his advice helped me a lot during this project. So far everything went pretty well, and there's something very appealing about the two-tone camouflage. It's minimalistic and cool at the same time, but brown will make it even better. Here I must say that I really wanted to try these colors straight from the bottle without mixing them with others, but the brown just seemed a little too dark for my taste. So I added about 20% of dark yellow into it. The thinning ratio was the same as with the green, so about 60% lacquer thinner. But please don't take my word for it, it's just a very rough estimate because I never measured them with drops or anything. Everything I do is done by feel. I was pleasantly surprised with this color because it sprayed even better than the green. And here's the thing, the problem with dark paints is that they're unforgiving. If your airbrush is sputtering, it's gonna show more than a lighter color, such as green in this case. My airbrushing technique is still very far from being perfect, but I'm still pretty happy for several reasons. There's room for improvement, which is always a nice motivation. You can fix the overspray with the base color, weathering will tone it down significantly, and last but not least, real camouflages were mostly applied in field workshops, so they were far from perfect. But I'm definitely not gonna try painting a camouflaged airplane, at least not at any time soon. Okay, here we have the finished camouflage, and I was able to finish it in one day. The primer and dark yellow were done on Monday, and this was done on Tuesday. And I've still had a few hours left, so I proceeded with the first stage of post-shading. As we know by now, it's the black-brown mixture. And once again, I used it to outline every detail which is covered with the camouflage. It was a fairly simple job, so I managed to finish it in less than an hour. And it makes a world of difference. The surface is now easily readable, so applying highlights is gonna be a breeze. At least I hope it will. Well, here I must admit that I've become a bit lazy. I again used 2 layers of highlights on each color, but only the first one was done with real colors. I simply added about 25% of dark yellow into them and used that as a light, desaturated, faded highlight. But any additional lightening would require more mixing. For example, the green would require more regular yellow so it wouldn't lose all its richness, and brown would need a few drops of red. Otherwise, it would turn into this grayish, purple-brown color. So instead of doing that, I grabbed my old Tamiya mixtures from a year ago, the same which I used to paint the Jagdtiger. If you want to know their recipes, they're in the Jagdtiger video, and I'll leave you a link for that in the description, and it should be also on your screen. Overall, it was the same process as with the base coat. And I even used a bit of the dark yellow mixture to correct some sputtering and overspray. But just like in my T29 video, I forgot to film it. But I think the final result shows exactly how I approached the whole thing. Now that I'm able to look at the model with a fresh mindset, I think the dark yellow could have been a little bit lighter. Maybe one extra layer of highlights would have done the job. But overall, I think it doesn't look bad at all. Now, to finish off the basic painting stage, I need to apply the markings. Here I wanted to use airbrushing stencils from solid scale, but the jagged Zimmerit surface was so gnarly they wouldn't adhere properly. So instead of risking any oversprays with black and white, I'll rather take my chances with decals. Yeah, again. So I did my traditional glossing before decals because I'm gonna do some aggressive stuff with them, and a layer of varnish will create a protective barrier between setting solutions and the paint job. Then I could apply the water slide decals which come with the kit. They're very thin and nicely printed, but that alone isn't enough, unfortunately. I left them to sit for a while and applied a coat of decal softening solution. That alone didn't do much, but I was expecting that. So after they had a few minutes to stick to the model, I grabbed a brand new number 11 hobby blade and sliced them apart. The Zimmerit pattern is a very good cutting template, so the process, while being drastic, was very simple and it's an easy trick anyone can use. Then I absolutely hammered them with a stiff paintbrush soaked in decal softener, and after a few minutes they were laying perfectly flat on the surface. Or should I say in the surface, because they got literally sucked into the Zimmerit. With that being a huge success, I could seal the entire model with my beloved VMS Satin Clear varnish. It's a magic potion with excellent self-leveling properties, and it has to be applied wet, so I pretty much hosed the entire model with the stuff. And look at them now. Are they decals or are they actually painted on? I'm telling you, it's black magic. Oh, and one last thing. I left the 88 barrel in dark yellow. I was too lazy to add the camouflage, but since it's impossible to tell from historical pictures, everything is possible. And it's gonna look like the barrel was replaced with a fresh one, so it adds some variation to the model. So what do you think, my friends? Please let me know your honest, unbiased thoughts and if it's any better than the Jagdpanther. I'm personally very satisfied with the result, and I'm even happier how fast the entire process was. I was able to create the post-shaded camouflage in 3 days, which was a very nice change because normally I spend like 5 when filming a video. I think the tank has a nice Normandy vibe, whatever that means. But you know, when I see German models from Normandy, the camouflage is usually something along these lines. aka real colors are good and very user-friendly, so if anyone has a hard time deciding between them and Tamiya acrylics, they're definitely worth a try. Now with the model post-shaded, weathering should be pretty straightforward, and I hope you'll join me for that in the next episode. I'll probably start with chipping because I'm very stoked to paint some oxide primer in those places with missing Zimmerit. The remaining details which I've removed from the model will have to wait for now, but don't worry, I'll give them a proper painting and weathering treatment when the time comes. Until then, I want to say thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it or found it interesting to watch, maybe helpful, that would be cool. And an honorable mention goes to my amazing patrons who make this weekly show possible. If you want to see frequent, almost daily updates from this model, but all of my other models as well, I'm posting them on my Patreon page. It's like a magazine or blog subscription because I always add my thoughts and experiences to each update. We can also get in touch through comments and DMs, so that's pretty cool. And if you can't wait to watch the next episode, it's already available ad-free on Patreon. And I also have these beautiful HD photos which you can download in full resolution, and some other goodies such as real-life references for dioramas, a bunch of 3D models which you can print, and so on. Alright, it's becoming a tradition that I'm very stoked to get back to my workbench. Every time I'm finishing a video I'm getting the shakes, you know, so Yeah, I'm gonna leave you for now, and I hope we'll see each other again the next Friday. Until then, stay safe, stay awesome, keep building models, don't just collect them, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!